I suddenly hear some shuffling around and the previously hurt gentleman yells at me, "I'm gonna kill you." Late night hikers, what is the creepiest thing you have seen while hiking?
I go out for walks very late at night fairly often, so I've seen a few things. The creepiest though, happened about 2 months ago. I left the house around 1:30 a.m., and it started off as a normal walk. I wandered around the town till about 2 a.m., when I decided to go home. I was walking back the route I had came, when I noticed a black van meander down the street. Didn't really pay too much attention to it though, at first. I did pay attention though when I saw it slowly drive by me for a second time. I wasn't entirely sure it was the same van though, so I just continued walking. But this time I kept an eye out. And lo and behold, about 10 minutes later, the same damn black van came down the street again. This time I knew for sure because it didn't have license plates. Now I was fairly scared, so I picked my pace up a little bit. When the van came around again this time, it stopped in the middle of the road a few houses in front of me. I stopped, turned around, and booked it back in the other direction. I made a few turns onto different roads, and then ran right into someone's yard. I waited behind their fence, and the same van came down the street. I assumed that when they couldn't find me, they finally decided to leave. But I waited in that yard for about 20 minutes before I ran back to my house and practically threw myself through my bedroom window.
Not hiking so much as car camping, but we were way out there in the middle of nowhere on BLM land in Colorado. We drove for an hour and a half down a Forest Service road and didn't see another soul. You could see headlights and hear cars from miles away from our campsite. It's not like somebody could have snuck up unnoticed. We had 3 cars with us and 8 people. Just got done eating dinner, cleaned up, it was getting dark so we went back to the cars real quick before hitting our tents for the night. Somebody had slashed the front right tire on each of the 3 cars with what appeared to be a box cutter. Everyone thought it was a prank but it became very apparent, very quickly that it wasn't. All of us were beyond spooked, like panicking, scary to watch spooked. We all had spares, and one dude had a gun, so we threw on our donuts while that guy literally guarded us and got the hell out of there. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Just knowing there was some person, probably watching us, maybe wanting to harm us, makes me feel physically ill to this day. I used to often spend my summers bouldering with my friends by a relatively large forest, that was about an hour and a half away from where I used to live. We used to spend some of the nights camping out there just to save some travel costs and time. Anyway, I think this was roughly like the 3rd or 4th time we were out there camping. My friend had left all her climbing gear and her rucksack just outside her tent, or we definitely think she did anyway. The next morning we found her boots, a few clothes and all her chalk powder had disappeared. We figured that it could have been completely feasible that she misplaced it, although we were quite sure that they were next to her tent. We didn't really want to believe that they were stolen. Anyway, we didn't read too much into this and just stupidly said to ourselves that perhaps she had left it by the boulders and some animal took an interest to it. I know it sounds stupid but it was very reasonable to us at the time. Fast forward a year, we're at the same spot as usual, sitting by the tents and chilling after having some food. Mind you, it's pitch black out, and only the camp area is lit by the fire. I go somewhere a bit out of sight for a slash, and what do I see? A dude in a full-on ghillie suit laying on his stomach looking right towards our campsite. I kinda stood there frozen as this dude clocks that I've seen him and he just bolts it out of there. I don't know whether the event to the year prior was related to the ghillie guy, but this definitely has stuck to all of us. We haven't been back there since, which is a damn shame. While it did not happen during the hike, rather the camping, it was still the creepiest thing I've experienced out there. Was working at a summer camp for kids, and we went on an overnight outing. Had a cougar circle our camp from around 11 p.m. to roughly 5 a.m. It was crying out, hoping one of us would separate from the group. I stayed up all night with bear spray and a hatchet, keeping an eye on it with the other staff. Not on a trail but walking my dog late at night. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, my dog rang her bell and I begrudgingly got up to take her outside. When she wants to pee in the middle of the night I don't take her very far, just in our side yard. I took a flashlight with me in case she decided to poo, so I could pick it up. I'm standing there waiting for her to do her thing. She is doing the doggy walk in a circle thing. Then all of a sudden the dog gets spooked and whips around. Out of the corner of my eye I see this chick just standing there. I didn't see her walk up, I didn't hear her walk up, I just see her standing there super still. Based on her position, she had to have come from between my house and my neighbor's house. Which is odd, because behind our houses back up to a green belt. It is probably 40 degrees outside, and this lady, about 20, is in super short shorts and a t-shirt. I looked at her, told her she scared me, and she mumbled something like, "Nice night, what are you up to?" Standing there holding the leash with my dog, I said, "I'm walking my dog." Then she said, "Cool, cool. Do you know how to get into my house?" I locked myself out, pointing to my neighbor's house. Now, I'm a good American, I know my neighbors, and this wasn't my neighbor, who is a single 30-year-old female. She hangs out with my wife, so I know her really well. So I asked her, "That house?" pointing directly at my neighbor's house. She nodded. I said, "You don't live there." "I know who lives there." She just scoffed and wandered her way into my backyard. I followed her, said, "What the hell are you doing?" She then took off running, scaled my fence. Which, item of note, it isn't an easy fence to scale. It is a deer fence. It is a see-through fence that goes up 3 feet with cattle gate, then the top of the fence is stainless steel wire that runs horizontally. It is the type of thing that, if you weren't expecting it, you'd easily trip over, as it is extremely hard to see and not very common. Anyways, she scales the fence and ran away into the green belt. I always have a pocket knife on me and was fortunate enough to have my, unfortunately, useless dog. So I looked around my house, neighbor's house, for other people. Shined my light in the green belt. And nothing. I have no idea how she wound up back there. What she was doing. What she intended to do. But she scared the ever-living hell out of me. It was in the summer around dusk and I was camping at a remote campground with my dad. There was a lake right next to the grounds and my dad and I would trailblaze through the forest right next to the lake, because if you went far enough there was a really pretty waterfall. A few strange things happened on this hike. We found a slash pile that had a little kid's shoe on top. When we came to a small clearing, my dad had to take a leak. He faced one side of the clearing, and I faced the other, and we both clearly heard a child say, "I'm over here." My dad thought it was me, and when he realized it wasn't, we spent half an hour looking for someone, but we found nobody. After that, we gave up on going to the waterfall, and started to make our way back to camp, but there were clear sounds of something following us, twigs snapping, bushes shaking. We haven't been camping there since. I go hiking in the woods that permeate my town, sometimes so late that I get to see the sun rise out there. The strangest thing I ever saw was what I could only describe as a shanty town was built up seemingly overnight deep into the woods. Simple little hovels made of scrap metal and bed sheets and a small fire pit that someone had made out of an old tire, with the fire still burning. But that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was that this was well past midnight when I found this place and it was quiet as a grave. There was no one there. Someone made the trouble of getting a fire going and then left it. From the look of it, this place could hold about a dozen or so people, and yet there was nothing there but the fire they abandoned, and whatever possessions they had left in the shanties. I was walking around my neighborhood alone once, enjoying the night air and watching the stars. There was this little pond near my house, with a wooded area that had trees, a bench and a rope swing that went out over the water. I sat down on the bench to look at the stars and I heard some rustling off to my right, towards the trees. Bears were not uncommon where I'm from, so I took out my flashlight and shone it around over there. I didn't see anything. It freaked me out, so I kept my flashlight on and my senses aware, but I stayed on the bench to mull over my thoughts and watch the sky some more. I don't know why I did that, cause that's typical horror movie stuff. Anyway, a few minutes pass and I hear nothing more, so I lean back into the bench and start to relax a bit. I'm staring up at the sky with my flashlight pointed downwards, so as not to create any light pollution, when I notice something in the tree in my peripheral vision. I couldn't tell what it was, but the branch was swaying slightly, and the rustling noise was back too. I immediately sat up and stared at it, but hadn't shown my flashlight at it yet in case of pissing off some huge bird or something else. I don't think I've ever been that scared. I remember my heart was beating so fast and I could taste blood. I stared at it for what seemed like forever, and it slowly stopped moving. But the shape was still there. Bears do climb trees sometimes, so I was hesitant to run away in case that's what it was. So I just kept staring at it. After a while I mustered up the little raisin-esque cojones to shine my light at the tree. It was a man. A scary man. In the tree. Crouched in the tree like some silent, naked monkey. He had no expression on his face but his eyes were open really, really wide. When my light landed on him he started to move like he was going to come down, but I didn't stick around to see if he did. I jumped the bench and ran for the hills. I ran to my house and around to the back door and locked myself in without looking back once. I went around and made sure every window and door was locked. I even checked the attic. I never go out alone anymore. Not so much hiking as walking home after work one night a lot of years ago. I normally got off around 7 p.m. and my walks home were uneventful. However, this night I covered a half shift for someone, and worked until 11 p.m. There was a trail behind some train tracks I would take home to avoid walking beside traffic and whatnot. I came to realize that night those trails were a lot different at 11 p.m. than they were at 7 p.m. I happened to come across a guy who was laying by his bike moaning in pain. It didn't sound like real moaning, more like a kid's fake "I have a tummy ache and can't go to school" moan. I also noticed his bike was standing up on its kickstand. It didn't make sense to me he would set his bike up properly only to fall to the ground in pain. He saw me and called out to me for help, but I kept walking and turned to make my way back up towards the street. As I turn, I suddenly hear some shuffling around and the previously hurt gentleman yells at me, "I'm gonna kill you." He hops on his bike and starts rushing towards me. At this point, I'm most of the way up the incline going towards the railroad tracks that ran parallel to the street. I haul up there, and as I get over the tracks, my would-be assailant proceeds to hit the tracks with his front tire and flips over his handlebars, hitting the ground hard. He is now moaning in pain for real, and makes genuine calls for help. I used a payphone at a gas station to call the cops and explain what happened. They get there and the officer explains to me this guy's a village idiot who does this stuff to rob people, and it's not the first time they had to pick his butt up after he biffed on a bike trying to rob someone. I told the officer he threatened to kill me and he laughed. Dude wasn't even armed, and apparently has had his butt kicked more times than he can count using that little line of his. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the bell notification. Find the original Reddit post in the video description below, and give the author some upvotes. And don't forget to share your own scary hiking stories.